Thank you very much, Sarah, for those very kind introductory remarks. And thank you so much to Kyle. Thanks to the organisers for inviting me to speak at what I think is a very important meeting. Why the World Needs China is a pretty provocative title for a book, right? But in my view, the essential correctness of that title is becoming clearer and clearer with every passing day, and specifically with every despicable act of aggression carried out by the United States and its Israeli proxy against the people of Palestine, against the people of Iran, of Yemen, and of Lebanon. As you all know, and as Richie's alluded to, last night the US military openly joined Israel's criminal war against Iran, bombing 3 nuclear facilities. I say openly joined the war because the fact is that the US and its allies have been providing weapons, intelligence, logistical support, war propaganda, diplomatic cover from the very beginning, both for this war in Iran and for the genocidal assault on Gaza. And, the whole world can increasingly see what the United States and its allies represent, and increasingly the whole world can see what China represents. And these are two vastly different visions for the future of the world. One which is put forward by the capitalist class in the United States, one which is put forward by the working class in China. The US is proposing a project for a new American century. This is originally a neoconservative notion associated with the likes of Paul Wolfowitz, Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, that's become a consensus position in mainstream US politics, and it's adhered to by all administrations, Republican and Democrat alike. It's a fundamentally hegemonist, imperialist proposal. It's a proposal for spreading death and destruction for the sake of projecting the US's domination of the 20th century into the 21st century. China, on the other hand, proposes what they call a global community of shared future for humanity. And the starting point for that vision is the United Nations Charter, its international law, it's the principles of peaceful coexistence. It's based on the clear understanding that humanity only has one home, Earth, and that peace, sustainability, and common prosperity can only be built on the basis of solidarity and cooperation. It's based on an understanding that imperialism, hegemonism, and racism are driving humanity not towards common prosperity, but towards common destruction. And, going back to the West Asia region, we can compare China's engagement with that area with that of the United States. It's very clear that where the US stands for conflict and chaos, China stands for peace and justice. Within hours of these criminal strikes against Iran's civilian nuclear energy infrastructure last night, China issued a firm condemnation pointing out that such actions seriously violate international law. And China was joined in this condemnation, by the way, by Russia, by Cuba, by Venezuela, and several other countries, whereas US allies and proxies and stooges such as Britain, where I am, France, Germany, and Australia voiced their support for the US's criminal acts. In 2023, China mediated a rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, an extremely difficult and complex piece of diplomacy conducted with a view to building peace, stability, and cooperation. From the beginning of this Gaza genocide, China has been a loud and consistent voice in the international community, condemning Israel's onslaught and demanding an immediate, unconditional, unilateral ceasefire and withdrawal. In 2024, so last year, China brought together 14 Palestinian factions, including Hamas, including Fatah, including the PFLP, the DFLP, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and others, in Beijing for reconciliation talks and to establish a platform for unity in the national liberation struggle. And China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi said of that declaration that only when Palestinian factions speak as one can the voice of justice be loud and clear, and only when they join hands and march forward shoulder to shoulder can they succeed in their cause of national liberation. Then moving a little bit further east from Gaza, in Iraq, there's a popular saying that while the US bombs, China builds. Take the case of Iraqi schools, for example. The US bombed literally hundreds of schools during the Iraq War from 2003. China right now is building literally thousands of schools in Iraq. Onto Iran, while the US has stopped at nothing to sanction and try and suffocate Iran and try and prevent its sovereign development and stand in the way of its solidarity with Palestine, the People's Republic of China and the Islamic Republic of Iran have steadily deepened their cooperation in recent years. In 2021, those two countries signed a 25-year cooperation agreement, including hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese investment in the Iranian economy, in energy, in infrastructure, in transport, digital technology, advanced industry, and more. And this deal is widely understood as being a response to the West's illegal sanctions and providing a kind of lifeline to Iran. You know, Iran has joined BRICS. Iran has joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Iran has joined the Belt and Road Initiative. It's very much aligned with this multipolar trajectory, with this vision of a global community of shared future. And actually, this blossoming relationship provides us with a quite important clue as to why Iran is being targeted for war and regime change. And, well, there are two key reasons, I would say, and those reasons are related. Firstly, as Richie has stated, Iran is the country that's done most to provide support, actual material support to the Palestinian people in their heroic struggle for national liberation and to put an end to Israel's genocide. Secondly, Iran is an important component of this emerging multipolar world order, of which China is very much kind of the driving force, and which poses a very real threat to the survival of the imperialist world system. And the reason those things are related, by the way, in my view, is that a truly independent, sovereign Palestine would also inevitably be part of a multipolar world aligned with the forces of peace and progress globally. And that's why the imperialists will not accept the establishment of a truly independent, sovereign Palestine. This multipolar world has been long in the making. Kyle's book quotes the China-Russia 1997 statement describing a system of international relations in which every country has the right to independently choose its path of development in the light of its own specific conditions and without the interference from other states. Differences in their social systems, ideologies, and value systems must not become an obstacle to the development of normal relations between states. All countries, large or small, strong or weak, rich or poor, are equal members of the international community. No country should seek hegemony, engage in power politics, or monopolize international affairs. So that's 1997, nearly 30 years ago. And this is the world we need. This is the world that China's working to develop. And that is why the world needs China. And what we're seeing in West Asia and what we're seeing further afield is this imperialist world order led by the US using ever more desperate measures to fight back against this multipolar trajectory. I said at a meeting last month of a British organisation, the Black Liberation Alliance, about the tariff war, that it's going to fail in both its stated objectives and its real objectives. But that the obvious concern following on from that is that the imperialism's next weapon against China may not be a metaphorical weapon, that the new Cold War will turn hot. And this isn't a matter of policy as such. It isn't just a matter of bad, evil people in positions of power. It's about the basic economic imperatives of imperialism. As Kyle writes in his book, in order to grow, the Western bourgeoisie must eventually subdue China. And if it cannot do so by subversion, sabotage, and trade manipulation, it will try to do so by force. And this is what we're starting to see. The deployment of every kind of weapon against all forces that work against US imperialism, that work against the project for a new American century. And, it has to be said that while China and while other countries are catching up economically, while BRICS has overtaken the G7 in terms of economic size, while China's catching up in terms of science and technology, while the Global South in particular is increasingly united around asserting its sovereignty and putting an end to this 500-year-old system of colonialism and imperialism, the fact is that the US still, broadly speaking, retains military hegemony. The US has around 800 overseas military bases. It has hundreds of thousands of troops deployed around the world, as well as every type of sophisticated weaponry. It has military alliances in the form of NATO and AUKUS. It's at war against Russia. It's at war against Iran, against Palestine, against Yemen. It's deepening its campaign of encirclement against China. So from a standpoint of basic materialism, we can't just ignore the role that's played by the US's military hegemony. And yet we also shouldn't imagine that this military strength means that our side is just defeated and we should simply give up. As Mao Zedong famously said in 1970, in relation to the war that was then raging in Vietnam, Laos and Cambodia, a weak nation can defeat a strong. A small nation can defeat a big nation. The people of a small country can certainly defeat aggression by a big country if only they dare to rise in struggle, take up arms, and grasp in their own hands the destiny of their country. This is a law of history. So today, a global united front composed of the socialist countries, the national liberation movements, the anti-imperialist forces of the global south, and the progressive forces in the advanced capitalist countries can achieve miraculous things. And that is where we come in. We have to work to build powerful mass movements in our own countries and engage in that global united front. We must support the forces of liberation worldwide. We must support the socialist countries, and particularly China, as the largest, the most advanced socialist country, as the country which is at the core of the emerging multipolar system. As Deng Xiaoping said in 1985, the stronger China grows, the better the chances are for preserving world peace. This, in my opinion, remains extremely true and extremely relevant. We have to counter the propaganda war against China because China is our strategic ally in the pursuit of a better, fairer, more peaceful, more equal, more prosperous, more sustainable world. And Kyle's book, Why the World Needs China, is a really valuable, really important contribution towards these goals. Thank you very much.